channel. I am the Epileptic Explorer, and tonight we will continue our reading in Star Wars, Darth Bane, Path of Destruction by Drew Karpyshyn, if that's how you pronounce his last name. I hope you all have been enjoying this book. I'm trying to read this book throughout the month, and I'm excited. I've been wanting to read this book this month for quite some time, and I'm looking forward to continue reading this to you guys. I know I'm a bit behind on reading it, but today I'll try to catch up on as much of it as possible. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and continue reading Star Wars Darth Bane, Path of Destruction. Chapter 5. The streets of Apatros were dark. Oro charged such high rates for power that everyone turned off all their lights when they went to bed. And tonight the moon was only the barest silver in the sky. There wasn't even the cantina's glow to guide him. Groshik had shut off the lights on its walls and dome until he opened the next day. Dez stayed in the middle of the street, trying to avoid barking his shins on the debris hidden in the darker shadows along the edges. Yet somehow, despite the near absolute darkness, he saw them coming. It was a split second before it happened, a sense that danger was coming, and where it was coming from. Three silhouettes leapt at him, two coming head on, and another attacking from behind. He ducked forward just in time, feeling the metal pipe that would have cracked his skull and knocked him cold, swiping through the air a hairbreadth above him. He popped back up as it passed and lashed out with a fist, driving into the featureless head of the nearest figure. He was rewarded with the sick crunch of cartilage and bone. He ducked again, this time to the side, and the pipe that would have brained him square between his eyes thumped down hard across his left shoulder. He staggered to the side, driven by the force of the blow, but in the darkness it took a moment for his opponents to locate him, and by then he had regained his balance. Through the gloom, he could just make out the vague outlines of his attackers. The one he'd punched was slowly standing up. The other two stood weary and ready. He didn't have to see their faces to know who they were. The ensign and the two soldiers who'd half carried the man from the cantina. Dez could smell the reek of coralline ale wafting up at him, confirming their identities. They must have waited outside the cantina and followed him until they thought they could jump on him. That was good. It meant they hadn't gone back to their ship to get their blasters. They came at him again, rushing him all at once. They had the numbers and months of military hand-to-hand combat training on their side. Dez had strength, size, and years of bare-knuckle brawling on his, but in the darkness, none of that really mattered. Dez met their charge head-on, and all four combatants tumbled to the ground. Punches and kicks landed without any thought given to target or strategy. The blind fighting with the blind. Each blow he landed brought a satisfying grunt or groan from his opponents. But his enjoyment was limited by the pummeling his own body was enduring. It didn't matter if his eyes were open or closed. He couldn't see a thing. He reacted on instinct. Aches and pains were washed away through his veins. And then someone had drawn a vibroblade. It was still black as the heart of the mines as the heart of the mine stirring a cave-in. Yet Des could see the blade clearly, as if it glowed with an inner fire. It stabbed toward him, and he grabbed the wrist of the wielder, twisting it back and driving it toward the dark mass from which it had appeared. There was a sharp cry, and then choking gurgle, and suddenly the burning blade in his vision winked out, the threat extinguished. The massive bodies entwined with his quickly untangible, two of them scampering clear. The third was motionless. A second later, he heard the click of a Luma switching on, and he was momentarily blinded by its beam of light. Eyes squeezed shut. He heard a gasp. "He's dead!" one of the soldiers exclaimed. "You killed him!" Shading his eyes against the illumination, Diz glanced down to see exactly what he'd expected. The ensign lying on his back, the vibroblade plunged deep into his chest. The Luma flicked off, and Des braced himself for another assault. Instead, he heard the sounds of footsteps fleeing in the night, heading toward the docking pads. Des looked down at the body, planning to grab the glowing blade and use its light to guide him through the darkness. But the blade wasn't glowing now. In fact, he realized it had never really glowed at all. It couldn't have. Vibroblades weren't energy weapons. Their blades were simple metal. There were more pressing concerns that how he had seen the vibroblade in the darkness. However, as soon as they reached their ship, the soldiers would report to their commander, who would report the incident to the Oro authorities. Oro would turn the planet upside down looking for him. Des didn't like his chances. It would be the word of a miner, one with a history of brawls and violence. At that, against two Republic naval soldiers, no one would believe it had been an act of self-defense. And had it been really? He had seen the blade coming. Could he have disarmed his opponent without killing him? Des shook his head. He didn't have time for guilt or regrets. Now, he had to find somewhere safe to hide out. He couldn't go back to his barracks. That was the first place they'd look. He'd never reached the mines on foot before daybreak, and there was nowhere on the open wastes he could hide once the sun came up. There was only one option, one hope. Eventually they'd go looking for him there too, but he had nowhere else to go. Groshek must have still been awake, because he answered the door only seconds after Des began pounding on it. The Nemodian took one look at the blood on the young man's hands and shirt and grabbed him by the sleeve. "Get in here," he croaked, yanking Des. "Get in." Excuse me. "Get in here," he croaked, yanking Des to the door and slamming it shut behind him. "Are you hurt?" Des shook his head. "I don't think so. The blood isn't mine." Taking a step back, the Nemodian looked him up and down. "There's lots of it. Too much. Smells human." When Des didn't reply, Groshek ventured to guess. "Gertz?" Another shake of the head. Jensen, Des said. Groshek dropped his head and swore to his breath. "Who knows? Are the authorities after you?" "Not yet. Soon." Then, as if trying to justify his actions, he added, "There were 3 of them, Groshek. Only one's dead." His old friend nodded sympathetically. "I'm sure he had it coming. Just like Gerd. But that doesn't change the facts. A Republic soldier is dead, and you're the one who's going to take the blame." The cantina owner led Des over to the bar and brought down the bottle of Cortic brandy. Without saying a word, he poured them each a drink. This time, he didn't stop at half glasses. I'm sorry, I came here. Des said, desperate to break the uncomfortable silence. I didn't mean to get you mixed up in this. Getting mixed up in things doesn't bother me, Groshek reassured him with a comforting pat on his arm. I'm just trying to figure a way to get us out of this now. Let me think. They downed their glasses. It was all Des could do to keep from panicking. With each passing second, he expected a dozen men in Oro body armor to crash down the cantina's door after what seemed like hours. But what was probably only a minute or two, Groshek began to talk. He spoke softly, and Des wasn't sure if the Nemodian was addressing him or merely talking out loud to help himself think. You can't stay here. Oro can't afford to lose their Republic contracts. They'll turn the whole colony upside down to find you. We have to get you off-world. He paused. But by morning, your picture will be on every vid screen in Republic space. Changing your looks won't help much. Even with a wig or facial prosthetics, you tend to stand out in a crowd. So that means we have to get you out of Republic space. And that means, Groshek trailed off. Des waited expectantly. Those things you said tonight, Groshek ventured, about the Sith and the Republic. Did you mean it? Did you really mean it? I don't know. I guess so. There was another long pause, as if the bartender was gathering himself. How would you feel about joining the Sith? He suddenly blurted out. Des was caught completely off guard. What? I know. People. I can get you off world. Tonight. But these people aren't looking for passengers. The Sith need soldiers. They're always recruiting. Just like those Republic officers tonight. Des shook his head. I don't believe this. You work for the Sith? You always said never take sides. I don't work for the Sith, Groshek snapped. I just know people who do. I know people who work for the Republic too, but they're not going to be much help in this situation. So I need to know, Des, is this something you want? I don't have a lot of other options, Des mumbled in reply. Maybe, maybe not. If you stay here, the Oro authorities are sure to find you. This wasn't a cold-blooded murder. The judiciary probably won't let you get off by pleading in self-defense. But they'll have to admit there were exhausting circumstances. You'll serve time on one of the penal colonies. 5, maybe 6 years. And then you're a free man. Or join the Sith. Groshek nodded. Or you join the Sith. But if I'm going to help you do this, I want you to be sure you know what you're getting into. Des thought about it, but not for long. I spent my entire life trying to get off this hunk of rock. He said slowly. If I go to a prison world, I'm trading one barren, blasted planet for another. No different than staying right here. If I join the Sith, at least I'm out from under Oro's thumb. And you heard what that Republic commander said about them. The Sith respect strength. I think I'll be able to hold my own. I don't doubt that, Groshek conceded. But don't dismiss everything else that commander said. He was right about the Brotherhood of Darkness. They can be ruthless and cruel. They bring out the worst in some people. I don't want you to fall into that trap. First you tell me to join the Sith, Des said. Now you're warning me against joining them? What's going on? The Nemodian gave a long, gurgling sigh. You're right, Des. The decision is made. Grim fate and ill fortune have conspired against you. It's not like Sabak. You can't fold a bad hand. In life, you just play the cards you're dealt. He turned away, heading out the small stairs at the back of the cantina. Come on. In a few hours, after they've searched the housing units in the colony, they'll start searching the starport for you. We have to hurry if we want to get you safely hidden away on one of the freight cruisers before then. Des reached out across the bar and grabbed Groshik's shoulder. Groshik turned to face him, and Des clasped the Nemodian's long, slender forearm. Thank you, old friend. I won't forget this. I know you won't, Des. Though the words were kind, there was an unmistakable sorrow in the gravelly voice. Des released his grip, feeling awkward, ashamed, scared, grateful, and excited all at the same time. He felt like he needed to say something else, so he added, I'll make this up to you somehow, the next time we meet. Your life here is over, Des, Groshik said, cutting him off. There won't be a next time. Not for us. The Nemodian shook his head. I don't know what's ahead of you, but I get the feeling it isn't going to be easy. Don't count on others to help. In the end, each of us is in this alone. The survivors are those who know how to look out for themselves. With that, he turned away, his feet shuffling briskly across the cantina's floor as he headed to the back exit. Des hesitated a moment, Groshik's words burning into his mind, then rushed off to follow. Huddled in the hold of the ship, Des tried to get comfortable. He'd been crammed into a small smuggler's hatch for nearly an hour. It was a tight fit for a man of his size. 20 minutes earlier, he had heard an Oro patrol come to inspect the ship. They had made a cursory search, not finding the fugitive they were seeking. They had left. A few seconds later, the captain, a Rhodian pilot, had rapped hard on the panel, keeping Des hidden. You stay until the engines go, he had called in passable galactic basic. We take off. You come out. Not before. Des hadn't recognized him when he'd climbed aboard. He had looked like any other Rhodian he'd ever seen. Just another independent freighter captain, picking up a load of Karpyshyn, hoping to sell it on some other world for enough profit to keep his ship flying another few months. If Oro had offered a reward for Des's capture, the captain probably would have sold him out. That meant the Oro managers hadn't put a price on his head. They were more worried about paying out a bounty than letting a fugitive escape Republic justice. It wasn't important that they found him, as long as they could show the Republic they had tried. Groshik must have realized all this when he made the arrangements to smuggle Des aboard. The high-pitched whine of the engines powering up caused Des to brace himself against the walls of his close quarters. A few seconds later, the whine became a deafening roar, and the ship lurched beneath him. The repulsors fired, the counterbalancing the vessel, and Des felt the press of the G's as the ship took to the sky. He kicked at the panel once, knocking it free, and untangled himself from the hidey hole. The captain and the crew weren't aboard. They would all be at their stations for liftoff. Des didn't know their destination. All he knew was that at the end of the trip, a human woman was waiting to sign him up for the Sith Army. As before, the thought filled him with a mix of emotions. Fear and excitement dominated all the others. There was a slight jostling of the ship as it broke at atmosphere and began to speed away from the tiny mining world. A few seconds later, Des felt an unfamiliar but unmistakable surge as they jumped to hyperspace. A sudden sense of liberation filled his spirit. He was free, for the first time in his life. He was beyond the grasping reach of Oro and its Karpyshyn mines. Groshik had said that grim fate and ill fortune were conspiring against him, but Dez wasn't so sure now. Things hadn't worked out quite the way he'd planned. He was a fugitive with the blood of a Republic soldier on his hands, but he had finally escaped Apatros. Maybe the cards he'd been dealt weren't so bad, after all. In the end, he'd gotten the one thing he wanted most, and when he came right down to it, wasn't that the only thing that really mattered? And that is the end of chapter 5. Check this real quick. Okay, looks good so far. Chapter 6. Vashira's yellow sun was directly overhead, beaming down across the lush valley and over the jungle camp where Dez and his fellow Sith troopers waited. Beneath the shelter of a Sidira tree, Dez ran a quick system check on his TC-22 blaster rifle to pass the time. The power pack was fully charged. Dez ran a quick system check on his... The power pack was fully charged, good for 50 shots. His backup power pack checked out too. The aim was off just slightly. Common problem with all TC models. They were good range and power, but over time their scopes could lose precise calibration. A quick adjustment brought it back into line. His hands moved with a quick confidence born of 1,000 repetitions. Over the past 12 months, he'd gone through the routine so many times, he barely even had to think about it anymore. A pre-battle weapons check wasn't standard practice in the Sith militia, but it was a habit he'd gotten into. One that had saved his life on several occasions. The Sith army was growing so fast that supply couldn't keep up with demand. The best equipment was reserved for veterans and officers, while new recruits were forced to make do with whatever was available. Now that he was a sergeant, he could have requested a better model, but the TC-22 was the first weapon he learned to fire, and he'd become pretty good with it. Little routine maintenance was a better option than learning to master the subtle nuances of another weapon. His blaster pistol, however, was top of the line. Not all Sith troopers were given pistols. For most soldiers, a medium-range, semi-repeating rifle was weapon enough. They'd probably be dead long before they ever got close enough to their enemy to use a pistol. But in the past year, Dez had proven a dozen times over that he was more than just turret fodder. Soldiers good enough to survive the initial rush and get in tight to the enemy ranks needed a weapon more suited to close quarters fighting. For Dez, that weapon was the GSI-21D, the finest disruptor pistol manufactured by Galactic Solutions Industries. Optimum range was only 20 meters, but within the distance, it was capable of disintegrating armor, flesh, and droid plating with equal efficiency. The 21D was illegal in most Republic-controlled sectors of the galaxy, a testament to its awesome destructive potential. The Disruptor's power pack carried only enough charge for a dozen shots, but when he was eye-to-eye with an opponent, it rarely took more than one. He slid the pistol into the holster clipped to his belt, checked the vibroblade in his boot, and turned his attention to his troops. All around him, the men and women of his unit were following his lead, making similar inspections of their own equipment as they waited for the orders. He couldn't help but smile. He trained them well. He joined the Sith armies as a way to escape both prison and Apatros itself, but it hadn't taken him long to actually grow fond of the soldier's life. There was a camaraderie among the men and women who fought at his side, a bond that quickly extended to include Dez himself. He never felt any connection to the miners on Apatros, and indeed had always considered himself something of a loner. But in the military, he'd found his true place. He belonged here with the troops. His troops. Senior Trooper Adenar noticed his gaze and responded by thumping a closed fist lightly against his chest twice, just over his heart. It was a gesture known only to members of the unit, a private sign for loyalty and fidelity, a symbol of the bond they all shared. Dez returned the gesture. He and Adenar had been in the same unit since day one of their military careers. The recruiter had signed them up together and assigned them both to the Gloomwalkers, Lieutenant Olabor's unit. Adenar picked up his rifle and sauntered over to where his friend was sitting. "You figure you're going to need that disruptor pistol of yours anytime soon, Sarge?" "No harm in being prepared," Des replied, whipping out the disruptor and giving it a spinning flourish before returning it to its holster. "I wish they'd give us the go-ahead already," Adenar grumbled. "We've been in position for 2 days now. How long are they going to wait?" Des shrugged. "We can't go until they're ready to move in with the main force. We go too early and the plan falls apart." The Gloomwalkers had earned quite a reputation over the past year. They'd been in scores of battles on half a dozen worlds, and they'd tasted far more than their share of victories. They'd gone from being one of 1,000 expendable frontline units to elite troops reserved for critical missions. Right now, they were the key to capturing the manufacturing world of Fashira, if someone would just give them the order to go. Until then, they were stuck in this jungle camp an hour's march away from their objective. They'd been here only a couple of days, but it was already beginning to take its toll. Adenar began to pace. Des sat calmly in the shade, watching him march back and forth. Don't wear yourself out. Don't wear yourself out, he said after a minute. We're not going anywhere until nightfall at the earliest. You might as well get comfortable. Adenar stopped pacing, but he didn't sit down. Lieutenant says this is going to be easy as a spice run, he said, trying to keep his voice casual. You figure he's right? Lieutenant Olabor had received many accolades for the success of his troops, but everyone in the unit knew who was really in charge when the blaster bolts started flying. The fact had become painfully clear nearly a year before back on Kashyyyk, where Dez and Adenar had seen their first action. The Brotherhood of Darkness had tried to secure a foothold in the Mid-Rim by invading the system, sending in wave after wave of troops to capture the resource-rich homeworld of the Wookiees. But the planet was a Republic stronghold, and they weren't about to retreat, no matter how badly outnumbered. When the Sith fleet first landed, their enemies simply vanished into the forest. The invasion turned into a war of attrition, a long, drawn-out campaign fought among the branches of the Roshare trees high above the planet's surface. The Sith troopers weren't used to fighting in the treetops, and the thick foliage of Kashyyyk vines of the forest canopy provided perfect cover for the Republic soldiers and their Wookiee guides to launch ambushes and guerrilla raids. Thousands upon thousands of the invaders were wiped out, most dying without even seeing the opponent who had fired the fatal shot. But the Sith Masters kept sending more troops in. The Gloomwalkers were part of the second wave of reinforcements. During their first battle, they were separated from the main lines, cut off from the rest of the army. Alone and surrounded by enemies, Lieutenant Olabor panicked. Without direct orders, he had no idea what to do to keep his unit alive. Fortunately, Dez was there to step in and save their hides. For starters, he could sense the enemy even when he couldn't see them. Somehow he just knew where they were. He couldn't explain it, but he'd stopped trying to explain his unique talents long ago. Now he just tried to use them to his best advantage. With Dez as their guide, the Gloomwalkers were able to avoid the traps and ambushes as they slowly worked their way back to rejoin the main force. It took 3 days and nights, countless brief but deadly battles, and a seemingly endless march through enemy territory, but they made it. Through all the fighting, the unit lost only a handful of soldiers, and the troops who made it back knew they owed their lives to Dez. The story of the Gloomwalkers became a rallying point for the rest of the Sith army, raising morale that had become dangerously low. If a single unit could survive for 3 days on its own, they reasoned, then surely 1,000 units could win the war. And in the end, it took almost 2,000 units, but Kashyyyk finally fell. As leader of the heroic Gloomwalkers, Lieutenant Olabor was given a special commendation. He never bothered to mention that Dez was really the one responsible, and he knew enough to stay out of the way when things got hot. So, Andar repeated, "What's the word, Dez? When they finally give us the go, is this mission going to be a spice run?" The lieutenant's just saying that he thinks we all want to hear. I know that, Dez. That's why I'm talking to you. I want to know what we're really in for. Dez thought about it for a few moments. They were holed up in the jungle on the edge of a narrow valley, the only route into Fashira's capital city, where the Republic army had set up its base camp. On a nearby hill, overlooking the valley, was a Republic outpost. If the Sith tried to move troops through the valley, even at night, the outpost was sure to spot them. They signal ahead to the base camp so their defenses would be up and fully operational long before the enemy ever reached them. The Gloomwalkers' mission was simple: eliminate the outposts so the rest of the army could launch a surprise attack on the Republic base camp. They had interference boxes, short-range jamming equipment they could use to keep the outpost from transmitting a signal to warn the main camp, but they'd have to hit them fast. The outpost reported each day at dawn, and if the Gloomwalkers struck too soon, the Republic would realize something was wrong when the daily report didn't come in. The timing was critical. They'd have to take them out just before the main force entered the area. That would leave a few hours to cross the valley and catch the base camp unprepared. It was doable, but only if everything was coordinated perfectly. The Gloomwalkers were in place, but the main force wasn't ready to make its move yet, and so they waited. I'm worried, Dez finally conceded. Taking that outpost won't be easy. Once we get the go-ahead, there's no margin for error. We have to be perfect. If they've got any surprises waiting for us, we could be in trouble. Adonar spit on the ground. I knew it. You've got a bad feeling, don't you? This is his score all over again. His score had been a disaster. After Kashyyyk fell, the surviving Republic soldiers fled to the neighboring world of Trandosha. 20 units of Sith troopers, including the Gloomwalkers, were sent in pursuit. They caught up to the Republic survivors on the desert plains outside the city of Hishkor. A day of savage fighting left many dead on both sides, but no definitive victor. Dez had been uneasy throughout the battle, though at the time he hadn't been able to say why. His unease had grown as night fell and both sides retreated to opposite ends of the battlefield to regroup. The Trandoshans had struck a few hours later. The pitch-black night wasn't a problem for the reptilian Trandoshans. They could see into the infrared spectrum. They seemed to come out of nowhere, materializing from the darkness like a nightmare-driven substance. Unlike the Wookiees, the Trandoshans weren't allied with either side of the Galactic Civil War. The bounty hunters and mercenaries of Hishkor cut a swath of destruction through the ranks of Republic and Sith alike, not caring whom they fought just as long as they came away with trophies from their kills. Details of the massacre were never officially released. Dez had been at the very center of the carnage, and even he could barely piece together what had happened. The attack caught the Gloomwalkers, like every other unit, completely off guard. By the time the sun rose, nearly half the Sith troops had been cut down. Dez lost a lot of friends in the slaughter. Friends he might have saved if he had paid more attention to the dark premonitions he'd felt when he first set foot on the forsaken desert world. And he vowed he'd never let the Gloomwalkers get caught in a slaughter like that again. In the end, Hishkor paid a heavy price for the ambush. Reinforcements were sent in from Kashyyyk to overwhelm both the Republic forces and the Trandoshans. It took less than a week for the Sith to claim victory, and the once proud city was sacked and razed to the ground. Many of the Trandoshans simply gave up the fight to defend their homes and offered their services to their conquerors. They were bounty hunters and mercenaries by trade, and hunters by nature. They didn't care whom they were working for, as long as there was a chance to do some more killing. Needless to say, the Sith had welcomed them with open arms. This isn't going to be a repeat of Hishkor, Dez assured his nervous companion. It was true, he had an uneasy feeling once again, but this time it was different. Something big was going to happen, but Dez couldn't say for sure whether it would be good or bad. Come on, Dez, Ador pressed. Go talk to Olabor. He listens to you sometimes. And tell him what? Ador threw his hands up in exasperation. I don't know. Tell him about your bad feeling. Make him get on the comm to HQ and tell them to pull us back. Or convince them to send us in. Just don't leave us sitting out here like a bunch of dead womp rats rotting in the sun. Before Dez could answer, one of the junior troopers, a young woman named Lucia, ran up and snapped off a crisp salute. Sergeant, Lieutenant Olabor wants you to assemble the troops by his tent. He'll address them in 30 minutes, she said, her voice earnest and excited. Dez flashed a smile at his friend. I think we finally got our orders. The soldiers stood at attention as the lieutenant and Dez reviewed the troops. As it always did, the inspection consisted of Olabor moving up and down the ranks, nodding and giving half-muttered approvals. It was mostly for show, a chance for Olabor to feel as if he had something to do with the success of a mission. Once they were done, the lieutenant marched to the front of the column and turned to face the troops. Dez stood alone in front of the unit, his back to them, so he could be face to face with his superior officer. Everyone here is familiar with our mission objective, Olabor began, his voice unusually high-pitched and loud. Dez guessed he was trying to sound authoritative, but it came across as shrill. I'll have the specifics on the mission to the sergeant here, he continued. Our task is not an easy one, but the days of the Gloomwalkers getting easy jobs are long gone. I don't have much else to say. I know you're all as eager as I am to end this pointless waiting. That's why I'm happy to inform you that we've been given the order to move out. We hit the Republic outpost in 1 hour. Horrified gasps and loud whispers of disbelief rose up from the ranks. Ulabor stepped back as if he'd been slapped. He'd obviously been expecting cheers and exultation, and was rattled by the sudden anger and lack of discipline. Gloomwalkers, hold! Des barked. He stepped up to the lieutenant and lowered his voice. Sir, are you certain those were the orders? Move in 1 hour? Are you certain they didn't mean 1 hour after nightfall? Are you questioning me, Sergeant? Ulabor snapped, making no attempt to keep his own voice down. No, sir. It's just, if we leave in 1 hour, it'll still be light out. They'll see us coming. By the time they see us, we'll already be close enough to jam their transmitters, the lieutenant ordered. They won't be able to signal back to the base camp. It's not that, sir. It's the gunships. They've got 3 repulsor craft equipped with heavy repeating flash cannons. If we try to take the outpost during the day, those things will mow us down from the sky. It's a suicide mission! It's a suicide mission! Someone shouted out from the ranks. Ulabor's eyes became narrow slits and his face turned red. The main army is moving out at dusk, Sergeant, he said through tightly clenched teeth. They want to cross the valley in darkness and hit the Republic base camp at first light. Then there's no reason for us to move so soon, Des replied, struggling to remain calm. If they start at dusk, it's going to take at least 3 hours before they reach the valley from their current position. That gives us plenty of time to take the outpost down before they get here, even if we wait until after dark. It's obvious you don't understand what's really going on, Sergeant. Ulabor spoke as if arguing with a stubborn child. The main force isn't going to start moving until after we report our mission is complete. That's why we have to move now. It made sense. The generals wouldn't want to risk the main force until they knew for certain the valley was secure. But sending them in during the light of day guaranteed that the Gloomwalkers' casualty rate would increase 5-fold. You have to come back to HQ and explain the situation to them, Des said. We can't take on those gunships in the air. We have to wait until they ground them for the night. You have to make them understand what we're up against. The lieutenant acted as if he hadn't even heard him. The generals have given the orders to me, and I give them to you, he snapped. Not the other way around. The army is moving out at dusk, and that's not going to change to fit your schedule, Sergeant. They won't have to change their plans, Des insisted. If we leave as soon as it gets dark, we'll still have that outpost down by the time they reach the valley. By sending us now is just enough, the lieutenant snapped. Quit braying like a bantha cut off from its herd. You have your orders. Now follow them. Or do you want to see what happens to soldiers who defy their superior officers? Suddenly, it was clear to Des what was really going on. Ulabor knew the order was a mistake, but he was too scared to do anything about it. The order must have come directly from one of the Dark Lords. Ulabor would rather slaughter than face the wrath of a Sith Master. But Des wasn't about to let him lead the Gloomwalkers to their doom. This wasn't going to his score. He hesitated for only a second before his fist into his lieutenant's chin, knocking him cold. There was stunned silence from the rest of the troops. As Ulabor slumped to the ground, Des quickly took away the fallen officer's weapons. They turned and pointed at a pair of the newest recruits. You two, keep an eye on the lieutenant. Make sure he's comfortable if he wakes up. But don't let him anywhere near the comm. To the communications officer, he said, just before dusk, send a message back to HQ telling them our mission is complete so they can start moving the main force into the valley. That will give us 2 hours to achieve our objective before they get here. Turning to address the rest of the troops, he paused to let the gravity of his next words sink in. What I've done here is mutiny, he said slowly. There's a chance anyone who follows me from here on in will face a court-martial when this is over. If any of you feel you can't follow my orders after what I've done here today, speak up now, and I'll surrender command to Senior Trooper Edinar for the rest of the mission. He gazed out across the soldiers. For a second, nobody spoke. Then, as one, they all raised their fists and gave 2 light raps on their chests, just above the heart. Overwhelmed with pride, Des had to swallow hard before he could give his final order to his troops. His troops. Gloomwalkers, dismissed! The ranks dispersed in groups of 2s and 3s, the soldiers whispering quietly to one another. Adinar broke away from the rest and came up to Des. Ulubor's not going to forget this, he said quietly. What are you going to do about him? After we take that outpost, they'll want to pin a medal on our commanding officer, Des replied. I'm betting he'd rather shut up and accept it than let anyone know what really happened. Adinar grunted. Guess you got it all worked out. Not quite, Des admitted. I'm still not sure how we're going to take down that outpost. And that's the end of chapter 6. Let me take a look at this real quick. Alright, that looks good. I've got one more chapter, I think, right? Yes, I got one more chapter after that. Okay. Chapter 7. The outpost was located in a clearing on the top of a plateau overlooking the valley. Under the cover of night, the Gloomwalkers had moved silently through the jungle until they had it surrounded. Des had broken the unit up into 4 squads, each approaching from a different side. Each squad carried an interference box with it. They had set up and activated the eye boxes once they closed to half a kilometer of the base, jamming all the transmissions within their perimeter. The squads had continued on to the edges of the clearing, then stopped, waiting for Des to give them the signal to move in. With no communication among the squads, the eye boxes jammed their own equipment as well. The most reliable signal was the sound of blaster fire. As he stared across the clearing at the 3 repulsor craft sitting on the landing pad atop the outpost roof, Des felt a familiar feeling in the pit of his stomach. All soldiers felt the same thing going into battle, whether they admitted it or not. Fear. Fear of failure. Fear of dying. Fear of watching their friends die. Fear of being wounded and living out the rest of their days crippled or maimed. The fear was always there, and would devour you if you let it. Des knew how to turn that fear into his own advantage. Take what makes you weak and turn it into something that makes you strong. Transform the fear into anger and hatred of the Republic. The hate gave him strength, and the strength brought him victory. For Des, the transformation came easily once the fighting started. Thanks to his abusive father, he'd been turning fear into anger and hate ever since he was a child. Maybe that was why he was such a good soldier. Maybe that was why the others looked to him for leadership. They were waiting on his signal even now, waiting for him to take the first shot. As soon as he did, they charged the outpost. The Gloomwalkers were outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. They'd need the advantage of surprise to even out the odds, but those gunships were a problem Dez hadn't anticipated. The clearing was surrounded by bright lights that illuminated everything within 100 meters of the outpost itself. And even though the repulsor craft were grounded, there was a soldier stationed in the open flatbed at the rear of each vehicle, operating the turrets. The armored walls of the flatbed rose to the waist height to give the gunner some cover, and the turret itself was heavily shielded to protect it from enemy fire. From the landing pad on the roof, the gunners had a clear view of the surrounding area. If he fired that first shot, the other units would charge out into the clearing and right into a storm of heavy repeating blaster fire. They'd be torn apart like Zuka tossed into a rancor pit. "What's the matter, Sarge?" one of the soldiers in his squad asked. It was Lucia. The junior trooper who delivered Ulbor's orders to him earlier. What are we waiting for?" It was too late to call off the mission. The main army was already on the move. By the time Dez got back to camp to warn them, they'd be halfway through the valley. He glanced down at the young recruit and noticed the scope on her weapon. Lucia was carrying a TC-17 long-range blaster rifle. Her knuckles were white from gripping her weapon too tightly in fear of anticipation. She'd seen only minor combat duty before being assigned to the Gloomwalkers, but Dez knew she was one of the best shots in the unit. The TC-17 was only good for a dozen shots before the power cell had to be switched out, but it had a charge well over 300 meters. Each of the 4 squads had a sniper assigned to it. When the fighting began, their job was to watch the perimeter of the battle and make sure none of the Republic soldiers escaped to warn their main camp. See those soldiers standing in the rear of the gunships? The ones working the flash cannons? He asked her. She nodded. If we don't get rid of them somehow, they're going to turn our squad into turret fodder about 10 seconds after this battle begins. She nodded again, her eyes wide and scared. Dez tried to keep his voice even and professional to calm her down. I want you to think about this very carefully now, trooper. How fast do you think you could take them out from here? She hesitated. I don't even know if I could, Sarge. Not all of them. Not from this angle. I could get a line on the first one, but as soon as he goes down, I doubt the others will stand still long enough for me to take aim. They'll probably duck down in the flatbed for cover. And even if I take the gunners out, there's half a dozen more soldiers on that roof who jump in to take their places. I can't drop 9 targets that fast by myself. Sarge, nobody can. Dez bit his lip and tried to figure out an answer to the problem. There were only 3 gunships. If he could somehow get a message to the sniper in each squad and have them fire at exactly the same time, they might be able to take out the unsuspecting gunners, though they'd still have to stop the other 6 soldiers from replacing them. He cut off his own line of thought with a silent curse. It would never work. Because of the eye boxes, there was no way to get a message to the other squads in time. Taking the sniper rifle from Lucia's hands, he brought the weapon up and set his eye on the scope to get a better look at the situation. He scanned the roof quickly from side to side, noting the position of every Republic soldier. With the magnification of the scope, he could make out their features clear enough to see their lips moving as they spoke. The situation was practically hopeless. The outpost was the key to taking fascira, and the turrets on the roof were the key to taking the outpost. But Dez was out of options and almost out of time. He felt the fear stronger than ever and took a deep breath to focus his mind. The adrenaline began to pump through his veins as he redirected the fear to give him strength and power. He lined the blaster's scope up on one of the gunners, and a red veil fell across his vision, and then he fired. He acted on instinct, moving too quickly to let his conscious thoughts get in the way. He didn't even see the first soldier drop. The scope was already moving to his next target. The second gunner had just enough time to open his eyes wide in surprise before Dez fired and moved on to the third. But she'd seen the first gunner go down and had already dropped down behind the armored walls of the gunship's flatbed for cover. Dez resisted the impulse to fire widely and moved the scope in a tight circle. Looking in vain for a clean shot, the sound of blaster fire exploded in the night, along with shouts and pounding feet as the gloom walkers burst from their cover and rushed the outpost. They'd followed their orders to the letter, charging out at the sound of the first shot. Dez knew he had only a few seconds before the turrets opened up on them and turned the clearing into a killing field, but he couldn't see the shot to take out the third gunner. He whipped the rifle around in desperation, looking for a new target on the roof. He set his sights on a soldier crouched down low beside a small canister. The soldier wasn't moving, and he'd covered his face with his hands, as if shielding his vision. The blast from Dez's weapon hit him square in the chest, just as the device at the soldier's feet detonated. "Flash canister!" Lucia had screamed, but her warning came too late. The view through the scope vanished in a brilliant white flare, temporarily blinding Dez. But with his vision gone, he could suddenly see everything clearly. He knew the position of every soldier, even as they all scrambled for cover. He could track exactly where they were and where they were going. The soldier in the third turret was training the cannons on the incoming wave of troopers. In the excitement, she popped her head up just slightly above the walls of the flatbed, leaving the smallest targets exposed. Dez took her with a single shot, the bolt going in clearly through one ear hole on her helmet and out the other. It was as if time had slowed down, moving with a calm and deadly precision. He trained his rifle on the next target, taking her through the heart. Barely a moment later, he got the soldier beside her right between his cold blue eyes. Dez took one man in the back as he ran for the nearest gunship. Another was halfway up one of the flatbed's ladders when a bolt sliced through his thigh, knocking him off balance. He fell off from the ladder, and Dez put another shot through his chest before he hit the ground. It had taken fewer than 3 seconds to wipe out 8 of the 9 soldiers. The last one made a run for the edge, hoping to escape by diving off the roof on the far side of the building. Dez let him run. He could feel the terror coming in waves off his doomed prey. He saved it for as long as he could. The soldier leapt from the rooftop and seemed to hang in mid-air for a second. Dez fired his last 3 shots into his body, draining the weapon's power cell. He handed the weapon back to Lucia, blinking rapidly as the tears welling up as his eyes tried to soothe their damaged retinas. The effects of the flash canister were only temporary. His vision was already beginning to return, and the miraculous second sight he'd experienced was slipping away. Rubbing his eyes, he knew now was not the time to think about what had just happened. He'd eliminated the gunners, but his troops were still outnumbered. They needed him down in the hot zone, not here on the edges of the battle. Keep an eye on that roof, he ordered Lucia. If any of those Republic mud crutchers appear on top. Take them out before they get to the gunships. She didn't reply. Her mouth was hanging open in amazement at what she'd just witnessed. She grabbed her by the Des grabbed her by the shoulder and gave her a rough shake. Snap out of it, trooper. You've got a job to do. She took her head. She shook her head to gather her senses and nodded. Then loaded another energy cell into her weapon. Satisfied, Des pulled out the 21D and charged across the clearing, eager to join in the battle. 3 hours later, it was all over. The mission had been a complete success. The outpost was theirs, and the Republic had no idea that thousands of Sith troopers were marching through the valley to attack them at first light. The battle itself had been short but bloody. 46 Republic soldiers dead, and 9 of Dez's own. Every time a Gloomwalker went down, part of Dez felt he'd failed somehow. But given the nature of their mission, keeping the casualties under double digits was more than he could have reasonably hoped for. Once their objective was secured, he'd left Adinar and a small contingent to hold the outpost. With Dez in the lead, the rest of the unit marched back to its base camp. Along the way, he tried to ignore the hushed whispers and furtive looks the rest of the company was giving him. Lucia had spread the word of his amazing shooting, and it was the talk of the unit. None of them was brave enough to say anything to his face, but he could hear snippets of conversation from the ranks behind him. Honestly, he couldn't blame them. Looking back, even he wasn't sure what had happened. Dez was a good marksman, but he was no sniper. Yet somehow he'd managed to pull off a dozen impossible shots with a weapon he'd never fired before, most of them after being blinded by a flash canister. It was beyond unbelievable. It was as if, when he'd lost his vision, some mysterious power had taken over and guided his actions. It was exhilarating, but at the same time it was terrifying. Where had this power come from? And why couldn't he control it? He was so wrapped up in his thoughts that first he didn't even notice the strangers waiting at their base camp. It was only after they stepped up and slapped the stun cuffs on his wrists that he realized what was going on. Welcome back, Sergeant. Willibor's voice was filled with bile. Dez glanced around. A dozen enforcers, the military security of the Sith army, were standing with weapons drawn. Willibor stood behind them, a deep bruise on his face where Dez had struck him. In the background, Dez could see the 2 junior recruits he'd left in charge of Willibor. They were staring down at the ground, embarrassed and ashamed. Did you really think those new recruits would keep their commanding officer trussed up like some kind of prisoner? Willibor taunted him from behind the protective wall of armed guards. Did you really believe they would follow you in your madness? That madness saved our lives, Lucius shouted. Dez held up his shackled hands to silence her. This situation could get out of hand far too easily. When nothing else happened, the lieutenant seemed to gain some courage. He stepped out from behind the protective wall of enforcers and over to Dez. I warned you about disobeying orders, he sneered. Now you get to see firsthand how the Brotherhood of Darkness deals with mutinous soldiers. A few of the Gloomwalkers began to reach slowly for their weapons, but Dez shook his head and they froze. The enforcers already had their blasters drawn and weren't afraid to use them. The troopers wouldn't manage to get off even a single shot. What's the matter, Sergeant? Willibor pressed, drawing closer to his defeated enemy. Too close. Nothing to say? Dez knew he could kill the lieutenant with one quick move. The enforcers would take him out, but at least Willibor would go with him. Every fiber of his being wanted to lash out and end both their lives in an orgy of blood and blaster fire, but he managed to fight the impulse. There was no point in throwing his life away. A court-martial would likely end in a death sentence, but at least if he went to trial, he'd have a chance. Ulabor stepped up and slapped him once across the face, then spit on his boots and stepped back. "Take him away," he said to the enforcers, turning his back on Dez. As Dez was taken away, he couldn't help but see the look in the eyes of Lucia and the troopers whose lives he'd saved only hours ago. He had a feeling the next time the unit went into combat, Ulabor would suffer an unfortunate and fatal accident. That realization brought the hint of a smile to his lips. The enforcers marched him through the jungle for hours, weapons drawn and trained on him the entire time. They only lowered them when they reached the sentries on the perimeter of the main Sith camp. "Prisoner up for a court-martial," one of the enforcers said flatly. "Go tell Lord Kopegs." One of the sentries saluted and ran off. They marched Dez through the camp toward the brig. He saw recognition in the eyes of many of the soldiers. With his height and bald head, he was an imposing figure, and many of the troops had heard of his exploits. Seeing a formerly ideal soldier being brought before a court-martial was sure to leave an impression. They reached the camp's makeshift prison, a small containment field over a 3 by 3 by 3 meter pit that served as a holding area for captured spies and POWs. The enforcers had relieved him of his weapons when they first took him into custody. Now they did a more thorough search and stripped him of all other personal effects. Then they shut down the containment field and roughly tossed him in, not even bothering to release his cuffs. He landed awkwardly on the hard ground at the bottom of the hole. As he struggled to his feet, he heard the unmistakable hum as the field was activated once again, sealing him in. The pit was empty. Other than Dez himself, the Sith didn't tend to keep prisoners around for long. He began to wonder if he'd made a serious mistake. He hoped his past service might buy him some leniency at his trial, but now he realized his reputation might actually work against him. The Sith Masters weren't known for their tolerance or their mercy. He defied a direct order. There was a good chance they'd decide to make a harsh example of him. He couldn't say how long they'd left him at the bottom of the pit. After a while, he fell asleep, exhausted by the battle and the forced march. He slipped in and out of consciousness. At one point, it was light outside his prison, and he knew they must have come. The next time he came to, it was dark again. They hadn't fed him yet. His stomach was growling in protest as it gnawed away at itself. His throat was parched and dry. His tongue felt as if it had swollen up large enough to choke him. Despite this, there was a slowly increasing pressure on his bladder, but he didn't want to relieve himself. The pit stank enough already. Maybe they were just going to leave him there to die a slow and lonely death. Given the rumors he'd heard of Sith torture, he almost hoped that was the case. But he hadn't given up. Not yet. When he heard the sound of approaching footsteps, he scrambled to his feet and stood straight and tall, even though his hands were still cuffed in front of him. Through the containment field, he could just make out the blurred forms of several guards standing on the edge of the pit, along with another figure wearing a heavy, dark cloak. "Take him to my ship," the cloaked figure said in a deep, raspy voice. "I will deal with this one on Korriban." That's the end of Chapter 7, and we'll go ahead and start Chapter 8. Dez never got a clear look at the man who'd ordered his transfer. By the time they'd gotten him out of the pit, the cloaked figure had vanished. They gave him food and water, then let him clean and refresh himself. Though he was freed from the cuffs, he was still under a heavy guard as he boarded a small transport ship heading for Korriban. Nobody spoke to him on the trip, and Dez didn't know what was going on. At least he wasn't cuffed anymore. He chose to take that as a good sign. They arrived in the middle of the day. He had expected them to touch down at Drishte, the only city on the dark and forbidding world. Instead, the ship landed at a starport built atop an ancient temple overlooking a desolate valley. A chill wind blew across the landing pad as he disembarked, but it didn't matter. It didn't bother Dez. After the stale air of the pit, any breeze felt good. He felt a shiver go down his spine as his foot touched Korriban's surface. He'd heard that this had once been a place of great power, though now only the merest shadows remained. There was an undercurrent of malice here. He'd felt it as soon as the transport had entered the bleak planet's atmosphere. From this vantage point, he could make out other temples scattered across the world's desert surface. Even at this distance, he could perceive the eroded rock and crumbling stone of the once grand entrances. Beyond the valley, the city of Drishte was a mere speck on the horizon. He was met on the landing pad by a hooded figure. He could tell right away this wasn't the same one who had come to him in the pit. This person had neither the size nor the impressive bearing of his liberator. Even through the containment field, Dez had been able to sense his commanding presence. This figure, which Dez now thought to be female, motioned for him to follow. Silently, she led him down a flight of stone steps and into the temple itself. They crossed a landing and descended another set of stairs, then repeated the pattern, working their way level by level down from the temple's apex to the ground below. There were doors and passages leading off from each landing, and Dez could hear snippets of sound and conversation echoing from them, though he could never quite tell what was being said. She didn't speak, and Dez knew better than to break the silence himself. Technically, he was still a prisoner. For all he knew, she was leading him to his court-martial. He wasn't about to make things worse by asking foolish questions. When they reached the bottom of the building, she led him to a stone archway with yet another flight of stairs. These were different, however. They were narrow and dark, and wound their way down until they vanished from sight into the deep bowels of the ground. Without a word, his guide handed him a torch she had taken from a bracket on the wall and then stepped aside. Wondering what was going on, Dez made his way carefully down the steep staircase. He couldn't say how much deeper he went. It was difficult to maintain any perspective in the narrow confines of the stairwell. After several minutes, he reached the bottom, only to find a long hallway stretching out before him. At the end of the hallway, he encountered a single room. The room was dark and filled with shadow. Only a few torches sputtered on the stone wall, their dying flames barely able to pierce the gloom. Dez paused at the threshold, letting his eyes adjust. He could just make out a dim figure inside. It beckoned to him. "Come forward." He felt a chill, though the room was far from cold. The air itself was electric, filled with power he could actually feel. He was surprised that he didn't feel afraid. He recognized what he felt as the chill of anticipation. As Dez moved deeper into the room, the features of the shrouded figure became clear, revealing himself to be a Twi'lek. Even under the loose-fitting robe he wore, Dez could see he was thick and heavy-set. He stood nearly 2 meters tall, easily the largest Twi'lek Dez had ever met, though not quite as large as Dez himself. His laku wound wound down his broad chest and wrapped back up again around his muscular neck and shoulders. His eyes glowed orange beneath his brow, mirroring the flickering torches. He smiled, revealing the sharp, pointed teeth common to his species. I am Lord Kopex of the Sith, he said. At that moment, Dez knew without a doubt this was the cloaked one who had come to him in the pit, and he gave a slight bow of his head in acknowledgement. I am to be your inquisitor, Lord Kopez explained, his voice showing no emotion. I alone will determine your fate. Rest assured my judgment will be final. Dez nodded again. The Twi'lek fixed his burning orange eyes on Dez. You are no friend of the Jedi or the Republic. It wasn't a question, but Dez felt compelled to answer anyway. What have they ever done for me? Exactly, Kopez said with a cruel smile. I understand you have fought many battles against the Republic forces. Your fellow troopers speak highly of you. The Sith have need of men like you if we are to win this war. He paused. You were a model soldier until you disobeyed a direct order. The order was a mistake, Dez said. His throat had grown so dry and tight that he had trouble getting the words out. Why did you refuse to attack the outpost during the day? Are you a coward? A coward wouldn't have completed the mission, Dez replied sharply, stung by the accusation. Kopez tilted his head to the side and waited. Attacking in the daylight was a tactical mistake, Dez continued, trying to press his point. Olabor should have relayed that information back to command, but he was too scared. Olabor was the coward, not me. He would rather risk death at the heads of the Republic than face the Brotherhood of Darkness. I prefer not to throw my life away needlessly. I can see that from your service record, Kopaz said. Kashyyyk, Trandosha, Bashira. If these reports are accurate, you have performed incredible feats during your time with the Gloomwalkers. Feats some would claim to be impossible. Dez bristled at the implication. The reports are accurate, he replied. I have no doubt that they are. Kopex either hadn't noticed or didn't care about the tone of Dez's reply. Do you know why I brought you to Korriban? Dez was beginning to realize that this wasn't really a court-martial after all. It was some kind of test. Though for what, he still wasn't sure. I feel I've been chosen for something. Kopez gave him another sinister smile. Good. Your mind works quickly. What do you know about the Force? Not much, Dez admitted with a shrug. It's something the Jedi believe in. Some great power that's supposed to be just floating out there in the universe somewhere. And what do you know of the Jedi? I know they believe themselves to be guardians of the Republic, Dez replied, making no attempt to hide his contempt. I know they wield great influence in the Senate. I know many believe they have mystical powers. And the Brotherhood of Darkness? Dez considered his words more carefully this time. You are the leaders of our army, and the sworn enemy of the Jedi. Many believe that you, like them, have unnatural abilities. But what you do not? Dez hesitated, struggling to come up with the answer he thought Kopez wanted to hear. In the end, he couldn't figure out what his inquisitor was looking for. So he simply told the truth. I believe most of the stories are greatly exaggerated. Kopez nodded. A common enough belief. Those who do not understand the ways of the Force regard such tales as myth or legend. But the Force is real, and those who wield It have power you can't even imagine. You have seen many battles, but you have not experienced the real war. While troops vie for control of worlds and moons, the Jedi and Sith Masters seek to destroy each other. We are being driven toward an inevitable and final confrontation. The faction that survives, Sith or Jedi, will determine the fate of the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. True victory in this war will not come through armies, but through the Brotherhood of Darkness. Our greatest weapon is the Force, and those individuals who have the power to command it. Individuals like you. He paused to let his words sink in before continuing. You are special, Des. You have many remarkable talents. These talents are manifestations of the Force, and they have served you well as a soldier, but you have only scratched the surface of your gift. The Force is real. It exists all around us. You can feel the power of it in this room. Can you sense it? Des hesitated only a moment before nodding. I feel it. Hot, like a fire waiting to explode. The power of the dark side. The heat of passion and emotion. I can feel it in you as well. Burning beneath the surface. Burning like your anger. It makes you strong. Kopez closed his eyes and tilted his head back, as if basking in the heat. The tips of his head tails twitched ever so slightly. The only sound was the faint crackle of flame from the torches. A bead of sweat rolled down the crown of Dez's bare scalp and along the back of his neck. He didn't wipe it away, though he did shift his feet uncomfortably as it trickled its way between his shoulder blades. The slight movement seemed to snap the twilight out of his trance. He didn't speak again for several seconds, but he studied Dez intently with his piercing gaze. You have touched the Force in the past, but your abilities are an insignificant speck beside the power of the true Sith Master, he finally said. There is great potential in you. If you stay here on Korriban, we can teach you to unleash it. Des was speechless. If you would no longer be a trooper on the front lines, Kopez continued, if you accept my offer, that part of your life is over. You will be trained in the ways of the dark side. You will become one of the Brotherhood of Darkness, and you will not return to the Gloomwalkers. Des felt his heart pounding, his head swimming. As long as he could remember, he'd known he was special because of his unique talents. And now he was being told that his abilities were nothing compared with what he could really accomplish. Still, part of him balked at the idea of leaving his unit without even having a chance to say goodbye. He considered Andor, Lucia, and the others as more than just fellow soldiers. They were his friends. Could he really abandon them like this, even for the chance to join the Sith Masters? He recalled one of the last things Groshek had ever said to him. Don't control on others for help. In the end, each of us is in this alone. The survivors of those who know how to look out for themselves. Everything he'd given to his unit. He'd saved their lives too many times to count. And in the end, when the enforcers had come to take him away, they'd been powerless to save him. They would have tried if he'd let them, but they would have failed. Des realized the truth. His unit, his friends, could do nothing for him now. He could rely only on himself, like always. He'd be a fool to turn this opportunity down. I am honored, Master Kopez, and I gratefully accept your offer. The way of the Sith is not for the weak, the big Twi'lek warned. Those who falter will be left behind. There was something ominous in his tone. I won't be left behind, Des replied unfazed. That remains to be seen, Kopez noted. Then he added, This is a new beginning for you, Des. A new life. Many of the students who come here take a new name for themselves. They leave their old life behind. Des had no desire to hang on to any part of his old life. An abusive father, the brutality of working the mines on Apatros. He had been seeking a new life for as long as he could remember. The Gloomwalkers had offered an escape, but it had been a temporary one. Now he had a chance to leave his past behind forever. All he had to do was embrace the Brotherhood of Darkness and its teachings. And yet for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt the cold grip of fear closing in on him. The fear made him hesitate. Do you wish to choose a new name for yourself, Des? Kopez asked, possibly sensing his reluctance. Do you wish to be reborn? Des nodded. Kopez smiled once more. And by what name shall we call you now? The fear would not stop him. He would seize the fear, transform it, and make it his own. He would take what had once made him weak and use it to make himself strong. My name is Bane. Bane of the Sith. Lord Cordis, exalted Master of the Sith Academy on Korriban, scratched gently at his chin with long, talon-like fingers. The student you have brought me, this Bane, has never been trained in the ways of the Force? Kopez shook his head and twitched his laku ever so slightly in annoyance. As I've told you before, Cordis, he grew up on Apatros, a world controlled by the Oro Company. Yet you managed to find this young man and bring him before the Academy? It seems almost too convenient. The heavy-set Twi'lek snarled. This is not a plot against you, Cordis. This is no longer our way. We are Brotherhood now, remember. You are too suspicious. Cordis laughed. Now you're not suspicious, cautious. It has helped me to maintain my position here among so many powerful and ambitious young Sith. He is as powerful as any of them, Kopez insisted. But he is also older. We prefer to fight our students when they are younger and more malleable. Now you sound like a Jedi, Kopez sneered. They seek younger and younger pupils, hoping to find them pure and innocent. In time they will refuse any who are not infants. We must be quick to pluck those they leave behind. Besides, he continued, Bane is too strong to simply pass over, even for the Jedi. We are lucky we found him before they did. Yes, lucky, Cordis echoed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. His arrival here seems to be an incredible turn of many fortuitous events. Quite lucky indeed. Some might say it that way, Kopez admitted. Others might see it as something more. Destiny, perhaps. There was silence while Cordis considered his long-time rival's words. The other acolytes have been training for many years. He will be far behind, he said at last. He will catch up, if given a chance, Kopez insisted. And I wonder, will the others give him that chance? Not if they are smart. I'm afraid we may simply be throwing away one of Lord Kane's best troopers. We both know the Jedi won't be defeated by soldiers, Kopez snapped. I'd gladly trade 1,000 of our best troopers for even one Sith Master. Portis seemed taken aback by his passionate reaction. He is that strong, is he? This Bane? Kopez nodded. I think he might be the one we've been searching for. He could be the Sith Ari. Before he can claim that title, Portis said with a cunning smile, well, he'll have to survive his training. And that is the end of chapter 8. I've got... Let's see here. Do I have to read one more chapter? Okay. Do I have to read one more chapter? Or should I hold? I think... Do I have time to read one more chapter? I think I'll hold off till tomorrow. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Please hit the bell so that you're not far behind with these books. I hope you all are enjoying this book in particular, especially for those Star Wars fans out there. Like and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. But yeah, comment down below. I want to hear your thoughts on the book. What do you think so far? Are you guys a fan of Darth Bane? Is there another Sith that you're a fan of? Let me know in the comments. And we'll see you all in the next video. Until then, this is the Epileptic Explorer, and we hope you all have a fantastic evening.